For the past week or so, the South African political news has been dominated by the firing of the Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield from the Democratic Alliance, Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, by President Cyril Ramaphosa, using a fairly sort of thin excuse. The President failed to respond to Mr. Whitfield's request to travel for 10 days, did nothing about it for 4 months, and then decided it was a crime worthy of a firing. All this happens while, as we've reported on the State of the Nation, many of the ministers and deputy ministers of the ANC are definitely what you would call compromised, and nothing has been done about that. So joining us today to discuss these matters and more is the one and only Helen Zille, Chairman of the FedEx of the Democratic Alliance. Helen, welcome to the State of the Nation. Been a while.
It's good to be with you again, Mike. Thank you very much for having me.
So, as you heard in the introduction, President Cyril Ramaphosa reached into the back of his closet, found a backbone, which he seems to be quite good at when he's dealing with people from other parties, and fired your Deputy Minister, Andrew Whitfield, on what seems to be quite a thin basis. What do you make of it all?
Well, we think it's an extremely flimsy basis. The handbook is very clear that you have to ask for permission if you are going on an official trip, and it is not so clear on unofficial trips. This was not an official trip. Andrew was not going to speak on behalf of South Africans or South Africa. What he was doing was going to try to save us from being kicked out of AGOA and to prevent those terribly punitive 30% tariffs that would have destroyed our exports to the United States and left hundreds of thousands of people unemployed. Our friends and allies in Washington had asked the DA to come over and assist them in trying to talk the Trump administration off a ledge of imposing all these things on South Africa, because as we all know, it's not the ANC that suffers, it's the poor and the marginalized whose ranks are swelled by more poor and marginalized people who are now out of jobs in agriculture, in manufacturing, coming in to their ranks. And so we thought it was a very important thing to have those high-level meetings and to explain why we have to do things that punish the ANC and the EFF, but not ordinary South Africans, and especially not exacerbate poverty, which is our biggest problem in South Africa. So Emma Powell, our international relations spokesperson, was going to go. She was asked by the party to take Andrew Whitfield with her. He's very in the know on all the issues that were going to be discussed. So he went along. 10 days before he was due to go, and it was a last-minute decision to insist that he went, 10 days before that, he wrote to the presidency, set out the nature of the visit, said it wasn't an official visit, it was a DA-paid visit, and asked for permission to go. Every day after that, his office followed up telephonically with the president's office. He received no reply. He then took counsel and decided to go because of the urgency of the issues. He came back, nothing. 4 months later, Cyril Ramaphosa decides to fire him for that. But on my reading of the ministerial handbook, he did what he was supposed to do. Andrew did what he was supposed to do. The president didn't respond to him, and to this day has not responded to him. And now we're in a situation where he gets fired, which I think is extraordinarily hypocritical and shows the double standard of the ANC.
Join us at our State of the Nation business breakfast at the Sandton Convention Centre on the 16th of July. Our guest speakers include activist Rob Hersov and well-known media personality JJ Tabani, as well as me, your host, Mike Sham. So if you're interested in joining us at our State of the Nation business breakfast, see the details below. We look forward to having you there. Okay, so without sort of getting into the lawfare of it all, whether he was, entitled to go or not, it seems like whichever way one goes in this, there's reasons other than just not having permission to have gone here. What is your reading then of the president dismissing Andrew Whitfield, if not because of this travel situation?
Well, Andrew Whitfield was in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and he was making his backbone very stiff there against cadre deployment on the IDC board. He was speaking out on the lotto tender, and he was arguing that what we need to be doing in South Africa is fighting poverty, not enriching a few wealthy elite people through the restitution process. And nobody liked that very much. And I think a lot of people in the ANC were baying for a scalp, and they looked around to find out who they could pin something on, and Andrew's number came up. That's what I think was going on.
Now, if he was, you mentioned these quite disturbing developments in the awarding of the lotto tender, as well as the appointment of the board of the IDC, which is something that has flown a little bit under the radar, but really needs to be looked at quite closely. If Andrew Whitfield was challenging this, at the same time it was coming out in the media, were the two actions linked? Was Andrew feeding the media, or was this just him talking within his ministry?
Well, I don't think Andrew was specifically feeding the media, but it's an issue that we have to drive in the DA. I mean, we drive issues all the time, and when we're fighting for the people of South Africa, we don't keep it quiet. I know the ANC doesn't like it when we speak to the media and when we expose all these things that are going on, but I'm afraid that's our job, and that is the media's job. We're functioning in a democracy here. So to sweep things under the carpet is not our style. And I'm sure the ANC didn't like it at all that Andrew was speaking on all of these topics. And we have a very strong suspicion that that is why he was fired.
The minister involved, Parks Tower, comes with a bit of a checkered past. His record in Johannesburg as a resident, I can tell you, as mayor, was the beginning of the slide of Johannesburg. But then, in ANC fashion, he got promoted to minister. What is his role in all of this?
Well, he certainly hasn't stood up for Andrew. And he was the person who sidelined Andrew from the process of the lotto tender very forcefully. So Parks is also the custodian of the failed BEE policies that Andrew was exposing as really being black elite enrichment and not doing anything for the poor. And Andrew was trying to focus the policy more on poverty and not on race. And of course, the ANC doesn't like that at all, because they've always used BEE as a kind of fig leaf to cover their own enrichment.
The president has said that he wants another name from your party to replace Andrew Whitfield. What is the next step? Are you going to give another name? Is it going to be within that portfolio, or are you still going to challenge his dismissal in the first place?
Well, that's a question that belongs with our leader, John Steenhuisen. I can't say that. Well, we've gone to lawyers and we've got legal advice, and our case is a bit difficult because in the handbook it is vague on whether you need to apply for permission if you're not going on an official visit, and it's not clear enough. And also, Andrew, hearing that the president wasn't pleased that he'd gone without permission, did write a letter of apology, which seems to imply that he did something wrong, even if he didn't. So sometimes when you apologize, it's not an admission of guilt. It is to try and smooth the waters. And in this case, it didn't work.
Now, Helen, all of this happens against the backdrop of 1 year of the government of national unity, put together with a lot of hope, the best wishes of many people in South Africa, and a belief that it would make a difference to the governance of South Africa. That was, sort of how it was sold to the South African public. I certainly can put myself up as somebody that had great hopes for the GNU. But we sit here 1 year later with this kind of action going on. And a country in no better shape than what it was, other than you can possibly get a passport, in shorter time. But other than that, no real benefit from having gone through the government of national unity. And now, this kind of dispute. The question is, is there now any point to the government of national unity that you can see? Because I'm struggling to see it.
Well, Mike, the biggest question in politics is always compared to what? But in politics, you don't have a control group. So you can't do a controlled experiment in politics. It's either one thing or the other thing. Now, if the ANC has been breaking South Africa for 30 years, it's a bit much to ask the DA to fix it in 1 year with 22% of the vote. And our hands not on the levers of the economy. We haven't got a single important economic portfolio. And when we fought very hard during the negotiations to get one, all the commentators and all the analysts rounded on us and told us to stop being cheeky, to be grateful for what the ANC was giving us, and to stop being demanding. And now they're turning around and saying, why haven't you transformed the economy? That's what they're doing. Now, something that you take 30 years to break is not going to be fixed in 1 year. And it's certainly not going to be fixed entirely from the portfolios that we've got, although we can drive economic growth and jobs to some extent in the portfolios that we've got. And that is what we've been doing. John Steenhuisen's agriculture recorded the greatest increase in growth and jobs of any sector of the economy in the last 12 months. That's a fact. Leon Schreiber's streamlining of the process of getting visas into South Africa has meant literally thousands of additional tourists, which is growth and jobs. Solly Malatsi rewriting the regulations for the IT agency, the state IT agency, CETA. CETA is an acronym for a number of things in the state, so I always have to remember which one it is. It's the state IT agency, has transformed the efficiency of things that we're going to do. And these all things are preconditions for getting the economy growing. Let me tell you that if we want to get the economy growing, we have to get a lot more votes. Like Cape Town is growing, like the Western Cape is growing, like their unemployment is dropping significantly. It's because they've had 20 years of DA governance. Not 1 year, not 2 years. These things are cumulative. So Leon fixing home affairs, John fixing agriculture, Solly Malatsi fixing communication and internet technology and IT and digital technologies is critical to the very foundation of growth and jobs. But we don't have any core economic sector portfolios, which is crucially what you need and what we will fight for. But if to get them, we have to have a bigger percentage of the vote, and people must get that. The more we have muscle, the more it has to be based on the votes we get. Our votes are our muscle, and we are your voice, and that is how it works. You can't give us 22% of the vote and think we're going to turn South Africa into Cape Town overnight. Doesn't work that way.
Let's just go back a step, Helen. You mentioned at the start of this that the DA was under enormous pressure to form this government of national unity from the media and many other quarters, was to get out there, stop being cheeky, accept what was getting sent your way, be quiet and do your job. And so this sort of gave the ANC the room to give you a few portfolios on the periphery of the country. And yes, you've made the best of them, but now a year later, you're not under that same kind of time pressure. You've been in the room for a while. We saw, John Steenhuisen probably enjoy probably a 40-hour round trip with President Ramapo in his private jet. But yet you're still being treated as imposters in this GNU. Now, I mean, it's a different set of circumstances now. It's a year later. You're not under that time pressure. Yet you are still being disregarded as partners. You're not being treated with any respect. So why stay? Why not leave?
Mike, we are not taking that lying down. We are fighting it very hard every inch of the way. We are, in fact, the strongest opposition inside the government. We've got a very unusual coalition. Normally, in any coalition in the world, with one party acting like us as a strong opposition inside government, that coalition would have collapsed long ago. We've decided to remain in the government and to fight the ANC on everything they do wrong and in every way they undermine us. We will continue that battle and we will not pull our punches. It is very clear that the voters like the GNU, and especially the voters like the DA in the GNU. And they want us to be in the GNU fighting for them. So while we are in the GNU, we can have our ministers doing the things that I've just described, and we can retain a very strong voice and leverage for the first time in opposition. Now that is enormous, and we give up a huge slice of that if we walk away. Then we can only expose and argue the toss. And also, what would replace the GNU would predictably be ghastly for South Africa. I think we must be very clear about that. People so lightly say, why don't you go? You're being disrespected. The important thing that you have to understand is that the DA in the GNU is the only thing that keeps people with confidence in the economy, that keeps people having hope in the future. I'm sorry, I've got a very bad throat. I have to cough, Mike, sorry. So sorry, Mike, I warned you that I had flu. So I don't think that you should underestimate for a moment the extent to which the DA's presence in the GNU makes it possible to create a platform for investment and growth. I am quite sure that if the DA walked out of the GNU, there'd be 25 Rand to the dollar, investment would be withdrawn. There would be huge numbers of consequences, including Trump kicking us out of AGOA and possibly imposing tariffs. Now, these are not scare stories. The DA played a critical role in persuading the Trump administration not to apply those measures. We undertook that while we were in government, we would continue to fight for major change and reform, which we are doing. But if there was a minority government that couldn't govern on the basis of their number of votes, and God forbid if the EFF and MK came into government, then you would see the consequences. And then people would shout and scream at us and say, look what happened. You walked out because you felt insulted. You did not have the staying power. You walked out because a colleague was fired. It's all about jobs for you. And now look what's happened to South Africa. Please think very carefully about the consequences. When we determine courses of action, we have a major brainstorm. We look at all the possible courses of action that we can possibly take. We game each one through and ask, will the consequences, will the medicine be worse than the sickness it's trying to cure? That's the question we have to ask here. And every know-it-all out there always knows a lot better. And then they'll say, oh, the national dialogue, that's nothing. It means a huge amount to Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa wants this to be a reincarnation of the Freedom Charter. And make no bones about it, this is the start of the ANC's national election campaign. Because what they're going to do, what they planned to do until we stopped it, was spend 700 million Rand of public money going around the country, having speaking opportunities all over, buying food for people, making sure the cadres get the contracts for the transport and the tent and the food and the drinking stuff, everything, and massively enriching their cadres who can then pump money back into the party, and using that as a front for the election campaign. That we know. And stopping that is not little, it is huge. And now we're busy, as I speak, fighting in Parliament against the budget votes of our coalition partner, the ANC. Now tell me one coalition anywhere in the world, anywhere, where a coalition partner has got up and fought against the budget vote of a coalition partner and voted against it. That coalition wouldn't last till the end of the day. So we're not doing nothing. We're doing major things that are causing serious ructions. And we've got far more leverage inside the government than we would have outside. If Ramaphosa throws us out, if President Ramaphosa kicks us out, so be it. But then the consequences will be on his head. We are not pulling our punches. We are standing up for our voters, and we are fighting for our voters.
So then look at this from a different perspective. Why does President Ramaphosa not kick you out?
Well, you need to ask him.
We've now recently heard from Secretary General Fikile Mbalula, who was, for all of his shortcomings, of which there are many, has previously spoken in favor of the GNU, being quite disrespectful to the DA. Paul Mashatile has said on many occasions that the DA must leave the GNU, and this isn't the commentary about them. Who from the ANC wants you in the GNU, and if there is nobody, why don't they just kick you out?
Well, you better ask them that question. That's not a question for me. My guess is that they know very well what the consequences will be, and they don't want to face those consequences.
Helen, do you think it's a reasonable tactic from the Democratic Alliance to continually talk about red lines and deadlines and so on that get disrespected by the ANC? Aren't you starting to look stupid now by giving these kind of things that you know are going to get broken by the ANC, and you've already said up front that you're not leaving? So what is the point of those red lines and deadlines?
When have we said we're not leaving? We've never said we're not leaving. We're not leaving on these issues. I mean, you've got to make the consequence fit the infringement. Okay, a deputy minister of ours was fired, and we believe totally unfairly. Are we going to bring a government down on that? That's the question you've got to ask yourself. That's my first point. My second point is this: which red lines have been rolled over on?
The passing of some of the laws.
I can think of one, only one.
And that wasn't enough to remove you?
Just tell me, which red lines have we allowed to be crossed?
Expropriation Act, Bella.
Hold on, we're still in the fight on the Expropriation Act, and let me tell you, we are going to win. You don't run away from a fight that you are going to win, Mike. The one that we were rolled over on was Bella. And why? It was because we put our faith in the conflict resolution mechanisms of the GNU. We went to the clearinghouse mechanism in good faith. We negotiated a good deal in the clearinghouse mechanism and its subcommittee in good faith. When it came back to the plenary, Andre Snell, Brett Heron, and Paul Mashatile, that little triad, overturned everything we'd agreed in the subcommittee and brought in a totally unacceptable conclusion. The president chose that out of the options he was given. Exactly the same happened when Solidarity took the matter to NEDLAC. They also reached a proper resolution, which was then totally disregarded and shunted aside by the ANC and by the presidency. And that taught us a very valuable lesson. The ANC has no integrity. They do not know how to get their institutions to work, and even when the internal institutions reach a compromise and reach an agreement, the ANC just ignores it. They've ignored that statement of intent from beginning to end. Many of them haven't even read it. And they have simply ignored it. Working with the ANC is pure culture shock for me. Because in my world, when you say you're going to do something, you do it. When you sign a piece of paper that commits you to doing something, you definitely do it. And when you set up institutions to receive or to achieve certain outcomes, you abide by those outcomes. None of that can be taken for granted in the ANC. None of that. Everything the ANC does is determined by its internal battle that they call the balance of forces. That is the only thing that determines what the ANC does. Now we know this. And we know that while the ANC has a strong plurality of votes, they're 40% or nearly 40% of the vote, it's really difficult to try and change that. But that is why we keep on going, we keep on using our leverage, we keep on fighting election after election so that we can grow. And the bigger we are, the more we can fix these things. So we were rolled over on Bella. That's what I'm prepared to accept. But having said that, we have a DA national minister who is writing the regulations. Would you rather have an EFF minister writing those regulations? That is the question you have to ask yourself. The question in politics is always compared to what? And here we tried in good faith to make the mechanisms of the GNU work. We went through the clearinghouse mechanism. It was a total farce. I've been speaking to Fikile and Balula about trying to institutionalize Section 19.3 of the agreement. He keeps on promising to do it. He never does. Because with the ANC, they try not to write anything down. They try not to put their signatures on anything. They try not to reach agreement. And even if they do, they ignore it. I have come to understand the scientific concept of chaos theory much more since trying to work with the ANC.
So then in sticking with the compared to what question, what does the DA hope to get out of this government of national unity? Because at the moment what we're getting out of it is continual drama. You know, it's sort of like the worst soap opera in the world, and no economic growth. On the other hand, we could imagine things getting worse. Of course we can imagine things getting worse. We could also imagine things getting better. But we've got to hold on to what we've got at the moment, which is kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. Another day of no economic growth, deteriorating infrastructure, and an economy that is just absolutely going nowhere. Is that what we must settle in for the next 4 years?
Let me tell you the truth. There will be no improvement in circumstances without the DA. Absolutely none. And it's rich. You know, the voters give us 22% of the vote. They waste a whole lot of votes in smaller parties that inevitably side with the ANC. Look what they did on the VAT. They all voted with the ANC. So we're doing this job alone, man alone. And you've got to understand what that means. If people want us to do more, they have to give us more votes. It's as simple as that. They can't give us 22% and expect us to revolutionize government. So this is the point that people have to get, and it's a critical point. Now, you've also got to understand that things get fixed much more slowly than they get broken. You can break an institution quickly, which takes 100 years to build. And you can break an economy in a decade that takes a very long time to build. And so all the small things we're doing is one step after another in the right direction. Now, if you take a step in the right direction every single day, you go very far over the term of 1 office, 2 office, 3 offices. But if you go a step backwards every day, and even 2 steps backwards every day, like the ANC's been doing for 30 years, you end up where we are now. We in the DA are trying to push a step forward every single day, and most days we get it right. And what you call drama in Parliament is not drama for drama's sake. These are crucial fights that we have to take the steps we have to have. So what we're doing with this drama in Parliament is fighting corruption. That's what we're doing. And we will never have economic growth if we don't succeed in the fight against corruption. We have to fight corruption to get economic growth. It is a complete travesty that somebody like Thembi Simelane is a cabinet minister and Obuhle Nkabani is a cabinet minister. And we are going to fight them until They are no longer cabinet ministers to get the message across that being corrupt will not be tolerated by the DA. And if just that sinks into the psyche of the GNU, we will have played a critically important role and an indispensable role if we want to have economic growth and jobs. So you cannot expect us in a year after we're in, where we're battling with all of these dragons on every single front, where we have 22% and the ANC has 39 point something percent, to be a party that calls all the shots. We negotiated as hard as we could in the very small window available against the know-it-alls and analysts all over the place who were telling us not to be cheeky and just get in and accept what was happening and what we were getting. When I wrote a letter demanding 10 portfolios, I think it was at the time, oh my goodness, the whole world nearly fell in. And then the ANC pulled a fast one on us, and instead of having the 27 portfolios that they promised, they went well over 30 portfolios. That is what it's like to work with the ANC. And the media, for the most part, still gives them the benefit of the doubt and tells us to fit in or leave. I was going to use a rather more crude term than that, but that is basically what the whole mindset is. Now, we're not going to leave, even under the cruder term of that word. We are going to stay in and fight. And every fight we have, Mike, every fight we have is going to be a fight that is relevant to ridding South Africa of corruption, growing the economy, and getting jobs, and fixing things that are so badly broken by an inept and corrupt government takes longer than a year. That I promise you.
Helen, you're not in this this government of national unity. It's not quite the coalition that it might have been, just two parties. There's other parties. In actual fact, it ended up, any party that felt like being in it seemingly is part of it. And so we've got a whole lot of parties involved. Why has the DA seemingly not been able to get those parties to coalesce around DA talking points and DA points of view? It seems like it seems like parties like the IFP that were your partners in the multi-party charter seem to be very happy to side with the ANC on every issue. We understand, Patriotic Alliance, they're already in alliance with the ANC. So, but what is the problem with those other parties that seem to be skating quite quietly by and letting you guys take all the hits? Why don't they step onto your side of the argument? The only one that ever seems to argue on your side seems to be the EFF. None of the other GNU parties seem to be terribly worried about some of the issues that you're worried about.
Mike, we've been pointing this out to the voters forever. And one day, maybe we'll get that message across. In the GNU specifically, none of the other parties have any leverage at all. The ANC and the DA together can form a government. We are not there because Cyril Ramaphosa did us a favor. We are there because the voters put us there. You've heard me say a lot in this interview that they gave us 22%, for which we're grateful. We could certainly do with a lot more if they want us to get more done. But we are there by the will of the voters. All of the rest of the smaller parties are there through a favor of Cyril Ramaphosa. They've got no leverage at all. If they say boo to a goose, they will be fired and there will be nothing they can do about it. We can bring the government down. And that is the difference. And so when people waste their vote on smaller parties thinking they're going to get anywhere, we've been saying this for years and years and years. Look at Lesotho in Gauteng. Look at what we've got here in Cape Town in the national government. Truly, I hope one day voters learn.
Helen, that sort of brings us to the point of what's happening at around the country. And you mentioned that you would consider becoming or running for the position of mayor in Johannesburg. That seemed to send everybody into an absolute spin, one way or the other. Is that something that you would still consider? Is it there's still a lot of water that must be flowing under the bridge? What can one read into that?
Look, there's still quite a lot of water that has to flow under the bridge there, Mike. I've just had notification that I passed the screening test, which I did expect to pass because I meet the criteria to be considered as a candidate. And then the next test is that I have to go for my interview and present the result of the assignment that I'm asked to do, and then answer a volley of questions. And all the applicants who pass the screening phase of the process will have exactly the same grueling obstacle course to run. And then the selection panel will send a suggestion through to the DA's federal executive, and the federal executive will make a decision. That's what has to happen. I do want to run. I was born and bred in Johannesburg. I studied in Johannesburg. I got my first jobs in Johannesburg. And I only came down to Cape Town because I met my husband and he was in Cape Town. And that's the only reason that I left Johannesburg, and it's now time to come back. The issue there is that we've got to tell the voters in Johannesburg that it's going to be a very long, hard haul to fix Johannesburg. Johannesburg is very broken. It's been broken over 30 years. We can have a vision of what it can become, but we can't reach there in 1 or 2 years at all. I'm prepared to give it my very, very best shot. But then the voters must make the DA the biggest party. That's the voters' responsibility. If they continue voting for all the other smaller parties, then the ANC will, again, be the biggest party. And then they get to put together the coalition. And mark my words, as has happened every single time, they will co-opt all the smaller parties, and the DA will be left standing alone to take on corruption, to take on power abuse, to take on the manipulation of state institutions, and to try and get policies bedded down that will grow the economy. And we will be man alone in that. So if people want us to be putting together the coalitions, then we have to be the biggest party to do so. But that depends on the voters.
And failing that, you wouldn't throw your hat into the ring. So, if the DA does end up with a healthy chunk of the vote, which they will do, but not the majority, that's you not keen to take that one up.
I'll tell you this, it's naive to think we're going to get over 50%. In proportional representation systems, no parties generally get over 50%. It's a very rare aberration that happens. And I'm very grateful that it happened in Cape Town and the Western Cape. I'm not expecting us to get over 50%, but we do have to be the biggest party to call the shots in the coalition.
And one would imagine that just by having this conversation, do we take it as read that you'll be stepping down from your current position?
Oh, yes, definitely. If I'm nominated as the DA's candidate, I certainly can't carry on this job. This is an absolute full-time job that I'm doing here, and it has to be at the FHO. I'm so sorry about my cold, Mike.
Thank you so much for joining us, despite your ill health. But as we sort of head towards the end, obviously there's been a mixed bag of by-election results. While we still keep on with the local government question, DA seems to have done well in the urban areas, but some setbacks in the peri-urban areas, especially in the Western Cape. What's going on there?
Yes, South Africa has not been immune to the identity politics sweeping the world, and we have to come face to face with the fact that there are many people who don't want to vote for a party that tries to stand for everyone and tries to ensure that everyone has a better future. They want a party that only stands up for them. Now, we know that South Africa can never succeed unless we work together to fix this country and to make it as great as it can be. But there are parties and there are charismatic leaders and there are demagogic leaders who will tell people, you've always been pushed to the margins, I stand for you and only for you, and you are my constituency and I will look after you. And that is a very, very appealing message to desperately poor people. And so we must accept that in this election cycle, it's going to have an impact. Absolutely, it is. But I have no doubt that people with those messages that are unviable for South Africa and who run autocratic parties without internal institutions of democracy are not able to attract talent, are not able to build a strong organization, and therefore are unsustainable over the long term. So we will see this phenomenon of the rise and then the rapid fall. It happened with COPE. I have no doubt it probably happened with MK, and it's even happening to the EFF. Without those three components, no party can stay the course.
Just sort of in closing, you mentioned identity politics, and, it came as a bit of a surprise to some that one of your young, up-and-coming, what looked like a star of the future, Liam Jacobs, left your party to join Patriotic Alliance. What do you make of that move?
Look, I think it was an impulsive move after an argument with somebody in Parliament. I had a good relationship with Liam, and I was sorry to see him go. And I think he, like all the other very young, shining stars who have a great future in politics potentially, underestimate the crucial importance of a strong organization behind them. And when they get irritated, they see greener grass on the other side. They go sometimes, not always, sometimes on rare occasions, actually, most stay. And they regret it afterwards. And I can tell you in 2 years' time, if not before, Liam will greatly regret this move, I'm sorry to say.
In closing, Helen, give us hope here especially those of us here in Gauteng that has been decimated by bad governance in a country with no economic growth. Is there something that you're seeing that looks more positive 1 year after the formation of the Government of National Unity and the elections of 2024 for the future? Or do you think it's all gone south and it just could have gone souther if other decisions had been made?
Look, fixing South Africa is not an overnight thing. And 1 year is a blink of an eye. The critical question you have to ask us is, are we moving forward? And my unequivocal answer is yes. And if next year we can win the major metros and put together DA-led coalitions, well, that will be the big watershed for South Africa. But again, that depends on the voters. Voters get the government the majority votes for. And if people want to rescue South Africa, it is up to them. We're there. We'll put a candidate in every ward. We're currently going through our candidate selection process. We're doing our best to get the very best candidates we can find. And we are doing our best to put teams together that will be able to do the job. We put an enormous amount of work into that. Really an enormous amount. We have thousands and thousands of applicants who have to be interviewed, sifted, analyzed, tested, all of that stuff. And we put them there. They're the best we can find. And we're saying, please help us. Because without your votes, we can't rescue any of our major cities.
Well, Helen Zille, I know many politicians that I've invited onto this channel, and they cancel without a hint of ill health or anything standing against them. You prove your mettle once again by standing by this interview and coming on air despite being under the weather. We wish you the best, fast recovery. And we really want to thank you for taking the time out to speak to us today. To everybody that watched this today, thank you so much. Please support Pace Car Rental. They keep us on air. And like and subscribe to the State of the Nation channel. To everybody that has joined us today, thank you so much for joining us on the State of the Nation. We'll see you again soon.